Hey, wholesale rebels around the world. We're live with another community call for ScanUnlimited and for our wholesale audience and our awesome wholesale rebels around the world. Today, quite special conversation and quite special topic. I'm here with David Vayner. David, hey, nice to see you.
Hey, nice to see you, Philip.
We're going to be talking about something. I was thinking about the topic of our conversation today, and I thought like there are a couple things in e-commerce sellers' life that people should know about, but they never want to know about really, and they don't want to learn. And we're going to talk a little bit today during our November 2023 community call about e-commerce insurance. And David, you are of the Coverdash fame, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about Coverdash. We're going to dive into why do wholesale sellers and e-commerce sellers need insurance? Why do most wholesalers do it wrong? And what are kind of the reasons to get an insurance for the business? Not the most sexy topic. Everybody just wants to talk about sales and profits, but maybe let's start with Coverdash and let's start a little bit about your journey to it and how did Coverdash come to existence?
Yeah, you're right that it's not the coolest topic to talk about because I've been trying it at bars and it never it never worked well. But yeah, happy. Thanks for having me on and happy to dive in a little bit. And I could start with a little bit of my background and how we kind of got started with all this. So I started in on Wall Street. I was basically an insurance investment banker. So what I would do is basically try to help insurance companies, brokers, insurtech companies either raise debt, raise equity, try to help them buy other companies. And my other co-founder and CEO is also a former insurance investment banker. And one thing we realized was that the way as small businesses and really e-commerce merchants more specifically were going about getting insured was just completely outdated, right? And e-commerce sellers specifically really kind of live in the modern times, right? They transact online, they do business online, they collect payments online, whereas the insurance industry as a whole is still a pen and paper business. So we realized that there was a little bit of kind of traction there. And what we saw was that the way e-commerce businesses were going about getting insured was still the same way every other business was going about it, right? So you got to call a broker calls back, takes about a week or two. Fax machines are involved. I don't even know what a fax machine is at this point. And the process takes 2 weeks when it really should take a couple of minutes. So what we wanted to do was build a platform where an e-commerce merchant can go online, get a quote, bind the policy, and pay for it, and have that certificate of insurance in hand, all practically within a couple of minutes. Um, and we've seen great success in that front. And I'll talk a little bit also as to why insurance is really important for e-commerce sellers. So what happened was about a year and a half ago, Amazon came out and said every seller with over $10,000 a month in sales, you got to have a general liability policy. And Amazon needs to be listed as the additional insured. And basically, the reason for that and the reason they instituted that rule was because what kept happening was you're an e-commerce seller. Let's say you're selling toothpaste, right? You sell it to somebody on Amazon, mother buys it, and then baby chokes on bottle cap. Well, they're going to sue Amazon and they're going to sue the seller. And Amazon basically said, listen, we don't want any of this liability. If you're doing over $10,000 a month in sales, you have 30 days to get an insurance policy, and Amazon needs to be listed as the additional insured. Additional insured basically means that Amazon is also covered under that insurance policy. So basically, Amazon would essentially be covered under all of their sellers' policies. Um, and that's where we really saw that the insurance requirements and insurance demand for e-commerce sellers really kind of took off. So yeah, and happy to go into details as to
And do you see, you talk to a lot of e-commerce sellers as a chief operating officer. I'm sure you're also looking at like how to get to and reach more e-commerce sellers. Do you see that even the more seasoned sellers and the more advanced ones, do they know about these, requirements and regulations, or most of them they know? But I find as an example, I talked to a couple of my friends who are bigger sellers in the industry in wholesale, and they were saying like, "Oh yeah, like insurance, yeah, this is something that the distributor should have, or the supplier should have. Me as a wholesaler, I'm good because it's Amazon." What's your experience with talking to e-commerce sellers?
So it's kind of exactly that, where it's depending on what you're doing, whether you're a reseller, wholesale, private label, whatever it might be. There's a lot of kind of finger pointing that's going on, and there is a very very large lack in knowledge in terms of what you need, why you need it, when you need it. Um, what happens a lot, and this happens with all areas of insurance, where it's I'll only get it when I need to get it. So what happens a lot of times with us is we'll get a call from a seller and saying, "Hey, we need an insurance policy yesterday because something just happened, or one of our vendors is requiring a policy." So there's a huge lack and gap in knowledge for exactly to your point in terms of what's needed and why it's needed actually.
And that is probably a stupid question, but it's a question. There are no stupid questions, first of all. And second of all, you should
No,
be asking
never.
all those. If you think they're stupid, they're the best questions. And I'm sure a lot of sellers that are going to be watching this will think about this. Is it possible to get a last minute insurance, or it's if something happened, it's already too late?
So it depends on what happens and how it happens, right? If something happened 3 weeks ago and you want an insurance policy for today, it most likely won't cover it. It depends on the specifications. That's why it's important to get it early on, so that things like that don't happen. And as I'm sure you know, with sellers, right, they're constantly reinvesting all of their capital back into the business, right? So they're operating on thin margins, capital constraint. The amount of money that you need to spend on insurance versus the risk factor, the exponential risk factor, is really minimal, right? So I'll give you an understanding. If you're a reseller and you're doing $1 million a year in sales, you can get a general liability policy that fills all of Amazon's requirements for less than for essentially a couple of grand a year, right? So a couple of $100 a month.
That is definitely something that will allow you to sleep better and actually do business more effectively. Because I remember one of my businesses that I eventually it got sold at some point, but one of the businesses we did have a claim and some issues, and it almost stalled our whole business because of this one thing, because we were so unable to know, like, okay, are we going to get out of this without a scratch? Are we going to have major issues? Do we need, like even we were thinking like, do we need a lot of rebranding? Do we, you know, it's scary. So from that moment, we actually did go into insurance. And I think what I would love to know from a perspective of how Coverdash helps sellers and e-commerce sellers, like that's something that we discussed pre-call. So like 10 reasons your e-commerce and any e-commerce business really needs insurance. And we said your e-commerce here on the slides. And I'm wondering, maybe, David, my first question would be, do you think every business needs insurance, or at what level do you think it starts making sense? Because it's scaling based on the revenue and on the profits, or how does it work? What's your recommendation there?
So essentially, whenever you form an LLC, you should get business insurance even before you collect your first dollar of revenue. And I'll tell you why. Um, Insurance isn't something that you want to hinder your business progressing, right? So you could form your LLC and you could be literally just a consultant or a contractor, not just an e-commerce merchant. Um, but if you protect yourself early on, first of all, you're much more protected from anything happening, right? So at the early stages of your business, you're much more capital constrained. And again, like I said, the amount of money you're spending on insurance versus the amount of coverage you get, it really makes sense to do it as early as possible. Um, so that's kind of the case. Additionally, what happens is as your business grows, you're not going to just need one insurance policy. You're going to need two to three to maybe even four, right? So let's say you just formed your LLC, you're going to need a general liability policy, right? To just that's the most basic insurance policy you're going to need. Then let's say you hire your first employee, right? Well, in the US and almost every single state, if you have at least one employee, by law, you are required to have a workers' compensation policy, which basically covers your employees in case something happens on the job. As you grow and you establish a web presence, you're going to want cyber insurance, right? Cyber liability. Now, a lot of big box retailers are pretty much requiring it before you sell in their stores. Um, so as your business grows, you're going to go from needing one policy to three to maybe even four, and maybe even more than that. So my recommendation is to get at least one literally right when you form the business.
That makes sense. Let's then talk about those 10 reasons.
Yeah.
You hinted at some of them, but I would
Yeah.
love to have a little bit of a conversation,
So
even one to his opinion about each of those.
yeah. So let's kind of just get started. So number one is really it's more so because you're gonna have to get it, right? So marketplace requirements. Kind of like I said, Amazon led the way with instituting the first rule. After that, all of the leading marketplaces started to basically follow suit. So if you want to sell on Amazon and you have over $10,000 a month in sales, you are now going to need to get a general liability policy with at least 1 million in coverage. And you're also going to have Amazon listed as the additional insured. Now, at some point, Amazon could start, closing accounts and finding businesses. So, and we all know that when it comes to selling on Amazon, it's better to be on their good side rather than be on their radar. So that's number one. It's really just to fulfill the marketplace on Coverdash. On our website, it's super super simple. You get a quote, you bind it, you pay for it, and then you click Amazon, and we automatically added Amazon as the additional insured, and we send it to Amazon so that they're verified and that you're basically cleared of the requirement.
And
So that's
do you guys at Coverdash also support other marketplaces?
Oh yes, yes. We support pretty much any marketplace that has a requirement. So yeah.
And every marketplace has, I assume, different requirements. So, for example, eBay or Walmart might have completely different
So
requirements,
that's a
correct?
that's a
Support
great
sellers?
question. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you support sellers with the other ones as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the requirements of the limits are generally the same. It's just where it's being sent to and a couple of other minor tweaks. So let's say you need to send it to Walmart. You click Walmart. We automatically add Walmart, and then we send it to their email address. We already have it all on the back end because we already know when you click Walmart, we know that you're just trying to fill their requirements. So we do it all on our back end.
All right. Tell me a little bit more about then the coverage for legal expenses.
Yeah. So legal expenses, right? So that's the main thing, right? Or one of the main things. So let's say somebody wants to sue you, whether it's a customer, the office right next door to you, um, somebody walks into your warehouse, slips and falls, um, and it could even not even be your fault, right? So you could be 100% out of the blame, but you're still going to need to hire a lawyer in order to basically handle that lawsuit. Um, and you know as well as I do, lawyers can get very, very expensive. And there's no reason, especially when it's not your fault, that you have to now pay out of pocket for legal expenses. But that's what insurance helps for. So regardless if it's your fault or their fault, the other party that's suing you, insurance will help with those expenses. And I'll tell you, I've seen just dealing with merchants and really all types of businesses, some of the lawsuits that come in the door are laughable and just have no merit at all, but you still need to get a lawyer for them. So that's one of the main things is that we see all the time with all types of businesses.
I
So
think
that's really one of yeah.
I think a lot of the anxiety and stress comes from defective products, and I know that one of the recommendations is like protection from the defective products. Can you elaborate on that? Is that something that happens often? Is that something that is an actual issue?
Yeah, it really depends more so on the type of product you're selling, right? You can imagine that um, if you're selling clothing or accessories, things like that, happens less often. But depending on the product you're selling and how complicated it is to manufacture it, that is something that could be huge. It's much more important for a lot of our wholesalers and a lot of our private label brands um, because the last thing you want is you're selling a defective product, customer sues you. It kind of goes into a little bit of that legal defense. And it's really really important as you start to sell kind of a little bit more complicated products.
Hazmat, stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That all is extremely
Yep.
crucial in those cases.
Yep.
I want to switch then to another reason why um, insurance makes sense, and a little bit different perspective: supply chain issues. These are probably, as I understand, not issues that directly might um, be connected to your users, clients, your people who buy your products for an e-commerce seller. But how can insurance help with supply chain issues?
Yeah. So it's very simple. So depending on where you're getting your goods from, right? The transportation of those goods oftentimes can be, lost, damaged among a bunch of other things. Making sure, and again, I'll tell you, it happens very often where you're shipping goods overseas, whether by land, which would be inland marine coverage, or ocean marine, which is overseas. Um, you know, Making sure that your goods come to you in a proper fashion is important. And the last thing you want to be doing is now playing a blame game of, okay, well, your goods got to you damaged. Well, your insurance should cover it, meaning the supplier or the transportation company. Um, it's always just easier and it's just much less of a headache if you have insurance to make sure that your goods get to you in a proper fashion.
And how does it differ from our next point, which is inventory protection?
So yeah, so that's a good point. Inventory protection is for basically anything that you have in your inventory in your warehouse, right? So let's say you're selling clothing, right? You have a warehouse. There's $500,000 in inventory in there. That protects it in case it's lost, stolen, damaged, and things like that, right? So it protects anything in your warehouse that you currently have. Versus the other part is really protecting the transportation of those goods.
It makes a lot of sense. And if you are selling FBA and you are storing some of your items in Amazon, facilities, that does not apply really, right? Like Amazon probably has their own rules and regulations to
Yeah,
that
that
extent.
applies less so. This is more so for you have your own warehouse, you have your own inventory. That's where a lot of the risks are because depending on where your warehouse I'll tell you, I again, this happens often. I mean, as our customer size grows, the risks that happen, kind of grow. But it does happen where we get a call from an insured and it's like could be midnight. They just walked into their warehouse to grab something and half their inventory is gone, literally stolen. So you don't want to be in that situation, and you definitely don't want to be in that situation without insurance.
I'm sure it's not easy to answer my next question in a definite manner. But let's say there's a scenario of such sort that somebody gets a break-in into the warehouse and the inventory gets stolen. Fortunately, that person is insured. In general, broadly speaking, what are the waiting times to get some kind of compensation to get if you are, let's say, with Coverdash to get that ball back rolling? Is that
Yeah.
a long
So that's
process?
a yeah, that's a great question. So first, I just want to make sure we make the distinction. Coverdash is an insurance broker, right? So we are the facilitator between the customer and the insurance company. So when you go online and you get a quote, we send that information out to a bunch of different insurance carriers that then come back with quotes. Now, different carriers work differently. Um, but I will tell you at Coverdash, what we also do is we've automated the FNOL process. That's the first notice of loss. So meaning that when you have a claim, you go on your customer portal, you log in, you fill out the claim amount, when it happened, how it happened, and then we know what insurance carrier you have, and then we basically send that information to the insurance carrier, and then we facilitate that conversation between the insured and the insurance carrier. Generally, it could take a couple of weeks, it could take a little bit of time, but we make that process as easy and seamless as possible for our customers, right? Because
Mhm.
yeah, one thing I'll just say is because that's really where the broker comes in hand, right? It's very easy to sell insurance and tell you, hey, you need it. But then when something happens, right, it's important to be there for your customers. So we try to make it so that it's really just as seamless as possible for them to get the money that they need for the loss.
There is the next point that we want to discuss very briefly, and I'll be honest here in front of everybody, I have no idea what it means, which is website coverage. What do you mean by website coverage? What can happen there?
Yeah. So website coverage is basically protecting your website in the event that it's shut down. Um, if, for whatever reason, whether through cybercrime or through malware, whatever it might be, right? Um, we we want to make sure that our customers, and this applies more so for if you have a DTC brand, but it applies to a lot of different businesses. Um, to basically ensure that you don't have any issues when your website is shut down from a cyber perspective. And this is something that's been, and this will lead into the next point about cyber attacks, and this kind of goes hand in hand. This is something that's been kind of rampant over the last really 10 years or so, since the cyber age, essentially. Um, and again, this I think I could talk in hand with the second point because this is a good leeway. But um, essentially, what happened was cyber insurance about 10 years ago started out. It was pretty much included into like general liability policies. It was pretty much an add-on. But given the rise of cyber attacks and malware and hacking and things like that, it grew as a much bigger risk for insurance companies, and it went from costing like $30 a month to a couple of $100 a month. And what we're seeing now is that it's a huge risk factor for businesses that transact online, that sell online, right? If your entire business is fully based on your web presence, not a brick and mortar store, it's really important that your web presence is fully protected.
I have a I have a personal story that happened probably around
Yeah,
seven
I'd
years
love to hear it.
ago, or 7 or 8 years ago. Um, it's in the cyber attacks time, probably in the kind of starting times. But I do remember up to today, like I sometimes still think about how bold they were. I had a supplier from China. It was a private label business, and we had a supplier in China, and we had a product. I worked with the supplier for like year plus already. Always good communication, good shipments. I remember the name of the girl that I was always communicating was Lisa. Uh, and one day I just, received an email like, "Hey, is there any next order that you wish to make from Lisa?" And I said like, "Yes, it's Christmas coming, so like we're times four our normal inventory." It was like $40,000 that I paid for inventory, and they said like, "Oh yes, no problem, but we have a just new account. Please just send this money to new account." Long story short, Lisa never received that money. The original true company supplier never received the money. Later on, I noticed that after they stopped replying, that the email was like with one dot in the name of the company extra. And at that point, I was like, right, I wrote to the true proper Lisa, and I was like, "Lisa, please tell me this is your other email," and I just didn't send like $40,000 to scammers. Is that something that would still like insurance would help with, or
Yeah,
how those
it
security attacks are much more different now?
security attacks, I'll tell you, are they get sneaky. They really do get sneaky. I get emails that look like they're from my co-founder or my partners, but they're really not. I mean, you probably get them all the time also, right? They're getting really creative about how they're doing it. And it's very easy as you're going through your emails to just click on the wrong link. And now me and my team, we're super vigilant of every email that comes in, and we before we click anything, we read the email address, who it's from, does it make sense, are there any kind of suspicious notes in the email, are there any weird links, right? Because it's really easy to get fooled, especially as you're just kind of scrolling through your emails and going through. So um, they're getting much smarter, they're getting a lot brighter in how they do it, and it's becoming a real risk factor for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, I think just having insurance from that perspective, from that one point, it's already a no-brainer. One more story comes to my mind, as probably everybody has plenty, but you would think I'm getting smarter, but like actually 2 weeks ago I was scammed as well, uh, from a completely different perspective. That shows just like that, just the scam can come from any side. And so I'm a trail runner. I run like in the mountains, long distance, and needed new shoes. And I went to a website of like it was I think ASICs or something like that. I just found the website on Google, or they had an ad on Facebook, I don't know, and they were just prices were so good because they were like 50% off only today, and I was like, oh my god, only today I'm buying this shoe. Never again I heard from that company. Website looking extremely legit. Uh, like they're already mimicking two normal big brands, so like doing that research as well on your behalf, on like your side as a commerce seller, especially if you're B2C, like business to customer, that's also extremely crucial. So yeah, I'm sure we could tell war stories for a while now, but I
You
want to. Mhm.
nobody is safe. Honestly, no,
No.
like it happens to everybody, right?
And we'll see what's going to happen with AI, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the next frontier of that alone should convince you to go to Coverdash and try
yeah,
get a quote. We have three more that and time that we're slowly running out of, and I want to cover them.
yeah.
I'm going to switch it a little bit. We wanted to discuss business interruption, um, and I think all those previous things can amount to that. Like, what is the scenario there, and how can insurance help in that case?
Yeah. So business interruption is basically there to supplement a business that lost income, right? So essentially, if you lost income because your warehouse burned down or something happened with your business where a tree falls on your office and you can't work anymore, right? So what insurance will do is cover that month or 2 months or whatever it is for the lost income while you restore your business. So essentially, because you are not operational for X amount of time, the insurance company will actually pay you to for that time that you lost your income. So that's essentially what it is. It's included in a business owner's policy. So it's basically additional coverage that you get on top of your general liability, and that's been a big kind of seller for companies with multiple office locations that are in distinct locations. Maybe it's prone to fires or whatever it might be, but that's really what it is. Essentially, if your business is shut down and you can't conduct business anymore, you can't take in any more revenue. That's what it's there for.
Okay, that makes tons of sense. What about employee coverage? Like, is that mandatory actually, or that is something that you know
So
it's a good practice? How do you see that?
yeah. So employee coverage is really for that's less so required by marketplaces, meaning the Amazons and the Walmarts and the eBays and the Etsy's of the world won't require it. But in the US, it's a state requirement. So kind of like what I was mentioning before is essentially if you are in the US and you hire your first employee, you're going to need to have workers' compensation insurance, and that basically covers your employees if they slip and fall on the job, they fall ill, any work-related injuries that happen to an employee. Uh, you as the employer need to cover them. So this is a law really set to protect employees, right? Because the last thing you want to happen if you're an employee of a business, and again, let's say you're an e-commerce merchant, you're just starting out, you just hired your first employee, you're already, like I said, running on razor thin margins, and an employee slips and falls, and they kind of deserve some sort of compensation, whether it's medical bills or things like that. You don't want to be as an owner of the business saying, "Hey, I can't really pay this out." So essentially, the states now require that you hire your first employee, you got to get workers' compensation insurance, and if not, after some time, they will fine you, and you could potentially run the course of shutting down your business in that state. So this is a really a big practice with really all types of businesses. This doesn't apply to work to e-commerce.
And I think like we covered 9 out of 10. The last one is financial protections, but it just shows everybody who's starting or just in getting into e-commerce, like how many different facades and layers and different sides to the business there are. That like really, it's just peace of mind in
Yeah.
some way, right? So financial
Yeah.
protection is kind of the essence of that, right? Just having kind of like a backup if something goes wrong, right?
Yeah. So the last point to have it, I know it's been the point of every single one, but I really can't stress this enough because you went off. I mean, again, I speak to sellers all the time, and these are hungry, passionate entrepreneurs, right? You went out on a limb. You just maybe quit your job, or you're trying to start this business on your own. You poured money, time, energy, put really all your chips on the table to start this, and now, right? And as I'm sure you know, starting your own businesses, right? You have no idea what's in store. And again, with with our own business, things happen just out of the unexpected. To really
Yes.
just have that little bit of peace of mind that if these 20 things happen to your business, you can be protected and you don't have to go out of business for them. And there are so many financial instruments today to make sure that you're properly paid. It really just doesn't make sense to not be protected as you grow, and make sure that you're always abiding by state guidelines and marketplace guidelines. But I really think it goes above that. I don't think it's just something that you should have just because you know a vendor requires it, or because Amazon requires it, or because the state requirements requires it. It's really peace of mind, and I think for any business owner, you really can't put a price tag on that.
At some point, it's actually unwise not to
Yeah,
have it.
yeah,
It's the light way to put it. At some
yeah,
point, it's just one of those must business decisions that is just a no-brainer. That's why I'm super happy that over the last 30 minutes you were here with us, David, and you kind of tried to show us like, hey, these are the reasons. Each one of them we could probably discuss more, show examples, and say like for that reason alone it makes tons of sense. So I would recommend everybody check out Coverdash, but maybe in your own words, David, like, all right, where can people learn more about Coverdash? Give us the address of the website so we don't go to the wrong one, and tell us like maybe one more time worth repeating, like, all right, how can we actually just get started with our business
yeah,
getting protected?
yeah. So very easy. You go to coverdash.com, you click get a quote, and you can get started right there. You're basically going to answer 10 questions. Most of it is literally name, phone number, email, address, revenue, payroll, what you sell, right? And that, right, what you sell, where you sell it. And then, pretty much from there, we collect that information. We send that out to the insurance companies right there on the spot. This isn't waiting days. Um, we aggregate that information, and then we come back with 3 to 4 quotes. And I kid you not, within 5 minutes, you could be covered, and you could have that certificate of insurance in hand. And Amazon or any other marketplace doesn't need to bother you, and you get your peace of mind.
That is peace of mind in a couple minutes, and something that uh, if you think that insurance is not the sexiest topic and you just want to like let's think about it later, think about the 10 less sexy topics we just discussed that you can have on your head, and it's just going to be a lot of headaches if something happens. So I agree, like it's just smart to get the business insured. And we do love the work you guys do at Coverdash. So David, thank you very much for being here today with us.
Thank you
I'm
for having
hoping
me.
that maybe in some time we can do a round two.
Absolutely, would love to. This has been awesome. Thanks
I
for having me on.
I need to listen to your horror stories of being scammed and cyber security, because I'm sure you know a lot, not only personal but otherwise. These are always juicy, so I'm always searching for those.
Yeah, I could talk to you for hours about it.
Well, we'll definitely think about round two. Guys, think about your insurance. Think about Coverdash. It's coverdash.com.
Yep.
We've been with David Weiner here, Chief Operating Officer of Coverdash. David, thank you very much. Hope to see you soon on the next community call. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.